Hi everybody, and welcome to the Bear Necessities. I'm Bear, and today we are making a strawberries and cream pavlova. For those who don't know what a pavlova is, it is a baked meringue, so it's crisp on the outside, and the inside is a little bit marshmallowy and soft. It's very sweet. Mine has vanilla bean in it, so it's got a nice vanilla essence. Don't worry, you can use whatever vanilla you have. You don't have to have vanilla bean paste or anything. There's nothing special needed for this. So the baked meringue, and usually then there's cream or whipped cream or cream sauces. If you want to have a wet pavlova, you just have to serve those incredibly fast. And then there's usually fruit as well. So to get started, you will need 4 egg whites. Whenever you're separating your egg whites, make sure there's no yolk in there. So get your hands really, really clean. And you're going to crack an egg and put it into your palm. And you're going to let the white sift through your fingers while holding onto the yolk. And if you're measuring it, if you want to actually make sure you get the right amount, it's about 3/4 of a cup. With that, you're going to need a cup of sugar. Then I have a 1/2 teaspoon of cream of tartar. This just helps the eggs to really stay together, to bind, and to lift as much as possible. It stabilizes them so that they don't weep or melt before you get a chance to really bake them off. And then finally, a teaspoon of cornstarch, which also really helps with keeping the eggs together and keeping them as fluffy as possible and helping them set up a very strong structure, because you're going to need one, because we're going to actually shape this a little bit before we bake it off. And I'm also going to add a teaspoon of vanilla bean paste, but you can use whatever vanilla you have. So let's get started. So first we're going to put our egg whites into a mixing bowl. I'm going to use my stand mixer today. This is Loretta. I've introduced her before. I love her. She's my darling. I need to send her in for maintenance. But I'm using the electric mixer because we're going to have to get these incredibly stiff. And I don't have a hand electric mixer that I would trust to do this. I have a little one, but it's not going to hold up to what I need. You can do this by hand, but your arm's going to get a little tired. So hopefully you're ready. And into that, I'm going to go ahead and start out with the cream of tartar and then also the cornstarch just right on top. And we're going to go ahead and add our vanilla bean paste. You can add your vanilla essence. Imitation vanilla is fine, whatever you have. Again, you don't have to have special things in the kitchen, especially mine. Also, if you just randomly have a vanilla bean, use that. Like, slice it down the middle, scrape out the bean, the little seeds, and put them in there. It'll be beautiful. So let's get our eggs whipping. I'm going to start this out on low just to get a little bit frothy, but let's get this going. And once we get to soft peaks, that's when you pull the beater out and the peak just falls over. We're going to start adding our sugar a little at a time. That's going to help it gloss, and of course it's going to sweeten it. So let's get started. Okay, so we are at soft peak stage, which means when I pull it out, it just falls over. It'll hold a peak in the bowl, not here. It'll hold the peak, but just fall right over. Right. And now we're going to start adding our sugar just a little bit at a time. So I'm just going to shake a little in while it's moving and keep going until this entire cup is used. And this is at stiff peaks. And I'll show you what that's like. So let's go. Still not quite where I want it. It's still a little on the soft side, but if you see, it's starting to get marshmallowy, which is what we want. And actually, if you were to do this and then add some melted gelatin to it and just keep whipping it, you'd be making a kind of marshmallow. And they're so good. So we're going to keep this beating. And in the meantime, go ahead and preheat your oven to 350 degrees. I always forget to tell you at the very beginning. I hope that the graphic that I put up there helps when I do. But yeah, let's get your oven preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And let's keep waiting. Oh yeah, so that is a stiff peak. Yeah, the top fell over, but it's not slumping all the way over. This is super marshmallowy. You see it holds onto itself when I move it. That is stiff peak. That's what you're looking for. If you look, it's actually rather thick. So there is our meringue. We are going to work with this to make the base of our pavlova. So I'm just going to put that there for now because I will need the beater maybe. However, I have a baking sheet here. You just need whatever you have. If you have a flat-sided baking sheet, like a cookie sheet, it's even better. I don't actually own cookie sheets, which is kind of weird. You'd think with everything I have in my kitchen, but I don't. So take your sheet, whatever you have, and if you have parchment, go ahead and line it with parchment. And you're just going to put your meringue right into the center, and this is going to make a pretty darn big base. And like I said, this makes a lot. And if you don't want to make just a giant base, which is fine, you can reserve some of this meringue and use it on another dessert, like a pie, or make a two-tier pavlova. So you'll cut this in half and make 2 discs, roughly the same size, or you can do one slightly smaller than the other. You can even pipe this. Here is my confession. Please don't judge me. I can't pipe. I just can't. When I was in cooking school, my chef would try to show me. They had classes after classes. I even took some classes at a cake decorating place. I can't pipe. I don't know. So I'm going to use a spatula to just smooth this out and make it almost like a little bird's nest. But if you pipe and you're good at it, or not, even if you're not, if you're brave enough to try, please do. However, I can't pipe. I can do a lot of things in the kitchen. That's not one of them. And so, like I said, I'm going to make mine a little bit rectangular. But if you'll notice, I'm making an edge. I'm making a bowl edge. It's not gorgeous, but it's tasty. Actually, I think it's pretty. It's a little off-center, just like me. So let's get this into our oven. So like I said, we have our oven preheated at 350 degrees. We're preheating, and the moment that it is preheated, I'm going to pop my meringue in there. Yes, we start at 350. Don't worry, it doesn't stay there. And the moment that I close the door, I'm going to turn the temperature down in my oven to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, because that's the temperature we want it to dry it at. We need it to be at 350 to start, because that sets the outside immediately, and it gives it a chance to not just blob all over the place. We're going to bake this for 90 minutes. That's 90, so an hour and a half. I'm going to go ahead and get this into my oven. Like I said, it starts at 350. The moment I close the door, it drops to 200. And it's going to bake for an hour and a half, so 90 minutes. And at halfway point, I'm going to turn it around. Then once it's done, that 90 minutes, I'm going to leave it in the oven, turn the power off to my oven, because mine's electric, and vent the door ever so slightly, because I want the steam to come out, and I need this to dry in the heat and then cool down in the heat, which sounds weird, but I need it to cool with the oven. If you let it cool too fast, it will crack. And you don't want that, because it will be difficult to serve whole if it cracks too hard. There will be little cracks, little fissures. That's not going to hurt it. That's fine. But big cracks, it'll break. So you don't want to deal with that. So remember, once it's done baking, hour and a half, turn off your oven, vent the door, leave it to cool. And that'll take another hour, hour and a half, maybe. In that time, it'll continue to dry out a little bit more, set the meringue a little bit more on the inside so it becomes marshmallowy. And you only want it to be room-ish temperature. It can be a little warmer than that. That's okay, but you don't need it hot. So I'm gonna get this in my oven, and I'll see you back in just a little bit. All right, so my pavlova is baking. I'm gonna go ahead and start making the decorational innard parts. We're going to be doing macerated strawberries, which is where you take strawberries, coat them in a little bit of sugar. I'm actually going to do a sugar syrup that I made with rosé wine and some sugar, and reduced it a little bit. I reduced the wine down to about half of what I started, just for that nice potent flavor, but I don't need it to be too liquidy. And then it has sugar in there as well. I'm gonna let the strawberries just sit in there for a couple of hours and really get soft and sweet and tender. Then I'm going to take them out of the sauce, and I'm going to actually cook all the juices and everything that come out with a little bit of cornstarch and really thicken it up so I can make almost, it'll be a strawberry thick syrup that I can drizzle over and make it pretty. And I'm also going to be making whipped cream, but this is stabilized whipped cream, so it might be a little different than what you're used to. You don't have to do it this way. This just helps it stay, if you have to leave it out at room temperature for a little while, and it won't melt, it won't weep, it'll stay together. And the way you do that is with gelatin. I've used that a lot lately, but it actually helps. You'll take a packet of gelatin, or however you have it, I believe it's 25 grams, and about a tablespoon of water. Mix them together and let it bloom for 5 minutes. I let mine go about 10. Then you're going to pop it in the microwave or into a pan if you don't have a microwave and melt it. In the microwave, it's only going to take 10 to 12 seconds. In the pan, it might take about a minute. You don't need it boiling hot. You just need it melted through, because then you're going to let it cool slightly, but you need it to be liquid. And then we're going to drizzle it into the whipped cream. You don't want to just toss it in, because then you'll get chunks. Chunks are not good. So let's get working on that. We're going to start with the whipping cream. I have a full pint here of just heavy whipping cream. And I'm going to pop that into my mixing bowl. And so this is about 2 cups of whipping cream. And for every cup, you're going to get 2 cups of whipped cream from it. So whipping cream doubles. Remember that. So if you just need a little bit, use less. And into that, I'm also going to go ahead and add a 1/4 cup of confectioner sugar. It's got a little bit of a stabilizer in it. We don't need this too overly sweet. And then, of course, I'm going to be adding a teaspoon of vanilla bean. Use whatever vanilla you have. Or if you want to try a different flavor, cinnamon whipped cream is amazing. Just use half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon in this. It'll be the best whipped cream you've ever had. It's really great on coffee too. Oh my gosh. Or hot cocoa. Or on a spoon straight into your mouth. Treat yourself. It's fun. But I'm going to use my vanilla bean paste just so I can continue using it. But extract, whatever, use about a teaspoon and you're good, right? Okay. And my balloon whip, you can do this by hand. I'm not peeling it today. So I'm going to go ahead and continue using Loretta for the day. And let's get this whipped cream going. All right, so right now I have my whipped cream at soft peak stage. So just like the eggs, when you pull it up, the peaks will just come down. We don't need it stiff yet because we're going to add our gelatin. I've already melted this and I've let it sit for about a minute to cool off slightly. You don't need it too hot because it'll melt the whipping cream and it'll take forever to get it back where it was. So I'm going to add this while this runs a little bit slower than high, probably 3/4 of the way on power. And just slowly pour this in so it completely mixes in, and that will help us stabilize our whipped cream so it can sit in the fridge or out on the counter, whatever, and it'll be perfectly fine. So let's get back to this, and we're going to whip this until it's at stiff peaks. So it is at full stiff peaks. You don't want it to go much farther than stiff peaks. It will turn into butter. Not a joke. Like, that's how you make butter. If that's what you want to do, go right ahead. It'll be very sweet vanilla butter. Yum. Great on waffles. But I'm going to get this out of here, and the moment I started adding the gelatin to it, it started setting up very quickly. So don't worry. You're doing it right. I already have a little piece of plastic wrap cut for this. I'm going to get this into another bowl. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and get this into my fridge so that it can set up completely. But first, let's get to the strawberries. If you are not like me and just want straight up good tasting sweet macerated strawberries, or you can just do fresh and not macerated, and that's fine too. Just slice them up and there you go. I'm gonna go ahead and move that. I have strawberries already sliced up. I have a pound of strawberries. I did leave one. We don't need the vanilla anymore. And this is the syrup that I made. So I took 12 ounces of rosé wine and a cup of sugar. Yes. And I cooked the rosé wine down first, and I actually flambéed it as it boiled to make sure to let it cook down farther and get a little bit of the alcohol out. You're not ever going to be able to get all of it out. That's not possible. But I got some. And so you won't get drunk off of this. And reduced it by about half, a little bit under half, but not too much. And then added the sugar, let it cook in there for just a little bit longer. And there is our reduction. Get that bowl ready. But first, I want to show you how to deal with a strawberry. Not a lot of people know. And so I figure, let's cover some basics here. So generally strawberries will have their little leaves on the top, their little cap. It's so pretty, and that's great for when you're dipping them in chocolate. Not so great when you're trying to slice them. So you're going to pull the leaves off, and I have a paring knife here, whatever little knife you have, or you can use a small spoon. That also works. You're going to get your knife in at an angle toward the top. You'll see there's a smooth part here just above the seeds. So stick your knife in there at an angle and follow it all the way around, keeping the knife away from your thumb, but using your thumb to guide it. And that just pulls the little plug right out, and that is a top strawberry. And then slice it in half, at least for these. You can cut them however you want. But then we're just going to cut little slices. They don't have to be absolutely perfect. And there you go, sliced strawberry. Covering the basics, always helpful. We're gonna go ahead and get those into a bowl, whatever bowl you have. So once you have your strawberries in, or whatever, again, whatever fruit you're using, and you want to macerate it, like say you're using blueberries, cut them in half. I know that'll be tedious, but it'll help. So you got that. Into a pound, you're going to want to put 3/4 to one cup of sugar. It is so much, I know. It's so much. If you want to reduce the amount of sugar, it'll still work. And this is a sweet treat. You don't have to use all the syrup at one time either. It's really good if you use it as a sweetener in, say, fresh strawberry cupcakes or muffins. Just add that in there. Oh, delicious stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and use my reduction because I have it here. And just pour that over. I'm going to toss it around a little bit. If you're using just regular sugar, stir it in. Don't worry about breaking the strawberries or anything. You probably won't. But just give them a little bit of a toss just to make sure everything is mixed together. And cover it with whatever you like to cover things that is fairly airtight. And there we go. And these will sit in the fridge for about 2 hours. The whipped cream can be in the fridge for however long you need it to be. It'll all be fine. And we're still waiting. The Pavlova is about 1/4 of the way through. So that'll give all of this plenty of time to get set up and happy. So I'll see y'all back in just a little bit, and we can continue moving from here. All right, so it's been kind of a day. So the Pavlova has just been sitting, which is great, or the meringue has been sitting for a while. And by a while, I mean about 9 hours. It ended up needing to bake about an extra half an hour-ish. So it is a little bit more golden, but it was staying too soft in the center. It was not setting. I just made it so thick. So be sure to keep an eye on it when you touch it. It shouldn't have too much of a give. It should be like you're pressing on a marshmallow. And that's when you know it's ready to just cool down and finish drying out. So I did go ahead and let it cool down for most of the day, which is great. And it held up pretty darn nicely. It's still a little crisp. Of course, with it sitting, it softens slightly. It's still going to taste amazing, and it still has a crisp outer shell, which is great. So I took the strawberries that we started macerating this morning, and I strained out the juice from them and popped that into a skillet. That way it's a nice thin layer and I could heat it up quickly. And I added 1.5 teaspoons of cornstarch to it because it was almost a cup of liquid. And I tasted it, I added a tiny bit of vanilla and a little bit of salt just to kind of help boost the flavors a little bit more. And then once it was thick, and I'm talking like it was nearly, like it was almost jelly thick. But once I had it done, I grabbed another bowl, put some ice, water, and salt in there, and mixed that together so that it would get extremely cold. And I just plunged this in, and I started stirring and stirring and stirring and stirring, pressing up against the sides, making sure the bowl stayed down into the water as much as possible to get this chilled down as quickly as possible so that it didn't, so that it didn't take me too much longer to do this. And then once I had it there, I actually took the last little bit of heavy whipping cream that I had, which was about 1 tablespoon, and I just stirred it in to kind of thicken it back, or thin it back out ever so slightly so it's pourable. But it gave it a nice, lovely color, and the taste is amazing. So we have our strawberry sauce. I also grabbed some sprigs of mint because, you know, it's fancy. And let's get started. The whipping cream set up really, really nicely. It's set up nice and thick. I gave it a good stir. Since it's stabilized, it's going to be a little bit different texture than you're going to get from like a creme chantilly, which is just whipped cream. It's the very soft, fluffy stuff that you're used to. Be mindful of that when you're going, oh my gosh, this texture is a little different. It's kind of more dense. It's way more creamy, which is nice. And once I had the cream stirred up, I actually added about 1 tablespoon of honey to it, just to give it a nice little bit of a flavor and to sweeten it up ever so slightly more, because I noticed it actually wasn't that terribly sweet. We have the cream spread out pretty nicely. I'm going to grab the macerated strawberries. It's not going to take all of these. These will be really good on pancakes, and I'm thinking that's probably what I'm going to end up making for breakfast tomorrow, just to kind of feed my boys something a little bit nice. And I'm going for country dessert, so it's not going to be fancy. And finally, I'm going to take some of this strawberry sauce, this creamy strawberry sauce, and just pour it right over the top. And so we have that, and now let's just grab a couple of leaves of mint and just put them around so that every piece, you might get a little bite of mint in there. I'm a huge mint fan, so this works pretty darn well for me, and most of the people in my house don't really mind it either, so it's convenient for me. But there we are, our little pavlova, strawberries, cream, a lovely meringue, a little mint, a little wine. Can't be bad, right? So I hope you enjoy making this or something like it as much as I did today. It's a lovely dessert. It's fairly simple when you look at the ingredients and how it's put together. But when you put yourself into it, it can be something so lovely and so different than what a lot of us are used to. And that's the point, switching it up, keeping it new, keeping it fresh. So, until I see you next time, bye. Oh my God, it's so good. You're going to enjoy this one. See y'all next week.